back to the channel and welcome back to spooky season, and today I've got a video for you. It is my top 10 horror books, and those are absolutely subjective. It's my opinion. Is this the best place to be getting this information? Probably not. About a third of all of the horror stories I have ever read are going to be included on this list because this is my top 10 horror books so far. It gives me kind of a baseline, something to go off of going forwards. I won't update this kind of list again for another kind of 2 to 3 years. So this gives me a kind of a baseline of the best horror books I've read so far. It gives me something to add to. What I will say is if you are really into your horror, and go over to a specialist for this kind of list, like Cliff's Dark Gems, something like that, where they have read hundreds of horror stories, and that might give you a better list. This is just my silly list at the end of the day. I'm going to start with a couple of recommendations or honourable mentions, and that is mostly because some of the books in this list may be horror adjacent. A lot of these kind of subgenres, they cross over quite a bit. So if you feel like it's not quite horror enough for you, maybe think about a couple of these honourable mentions. The first of which I don't have here with me, but is The Three Imposters by Arthur Machen. I don't know where I've put that on my shelves, but effectively that is 3 novellas that kind of tie in together, and they are creepy, kind of gruesome stories. They are quite effective, but it didn't quite make my list. As also, I would recommend H.P. Lovecraft's The Dunwich Horror. It is probably my favourite of the Cthulhu Mythos stories I've read so far. It is, again, about 60 odd pages in novella length, and it builds good atmosphere. It doesn't quite make my top 10, but if there's a book in here you don't like, I would say slide one of those 2 in instead. So let's get started. At number 10, I'm going to go with M.R. James, and this is Ghost Stories of an Antiquary. Now, this is a series of short stories and novellas that are extremely effective. They kind of give you some really menacing atmosphere. Some of them are much better than others. It's down here at number 10 because with a lot of these kind of collections, you get some that hit really hard and some that don't hit quite as hard. But certainly, I think it is deserving of a place at number 10. At number 9, talking about menacing atmospheres, The Great God Pan by Arthur Machen is almost all atmosphere. It does rely a lot on the reader to kind of give a lot of their own imagination to the story. But if you like H.P. Lovecraft and you want to see something that is almost entirely atmosphere-led, The Great God Pan, it is novella length, just under 100 pages, I believe. So it won't take you too long to read either. At number 8, a novella that's kind of been beefed up to almost novel length, and that would be Frozen Hell by John W. Campbell, which is Who Goes There by John W. Campbell. The Thing, the story, the text that kind of inspired the Thing by John Carpenter, and initially from the 50s movie as well. And this has the first couple of chapters thrown in there, which are very kind of reminiscent of At the Mountains of Madness. It's an Antarctic expedition. It gives you more of the character work, more of the atmosphere build in this more complete version that came from his original manuscript. At number 7, another classic. There's going to be a lot of classics in here. I like to read classics, so some of these horrors are coming from the classics list, so to speak. And that is The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells, and a book that I think, a novel that really goes under the radar. It's not particularly long. I think this one was like 150 pages or something like that. Yeah, it's like 150 pages. So it won't take you forever to read. It's probably about 50,000 words, but it's very effective. It is kind of unsettling and gruesome and dark. And yeah, really effective. A classic that does get spoken about quite enough. Now, at number 6, you can call recency bias on this if you would like. It is Black Destroyer by A.E. Van Vogt. Now, I read this recently. It's a short story. It's only about 12,000 words. It is the inspiration for the movie Alien. And it is about the perfect killing machine up against a resourceful group of astronauts. And if you've seen Alien, you may argue that is more of a sci-fi movie, or this is more of a sci-fi short story than horror. It straddles the line. I thought it was very effective. I would actually have it in as my number 6 at the moment. At number 5, if you like vampires, it's hard to go wrong with I Am Legend. This is very creepy, very unsettling, not particularly long again. A lot of these are quite short. If you want to get through 10 really good books, this is an easy way to do it. This is, I think, about 165, 170 pages, but is extremely effective, creepy and unsettling and claustrophobic. It's a horrible novel in ways, but it is very, very well written. At number 4 is Pines by Blake Crouch. Now, some people may look at this and think, is that really horror? Yes, it is very much horror. It is very much sci-fi. It's very much a techno thriller. It's a lot of books for a lot of people, but it does take very strong inspiration, I feel, from, or gives inspiration, I'm not quite sure on dates there, from 2 very good horror movies from the noughties. If you've read this book, you know the 2 scenes, the 2 areas that I'm talking about, but there is some very effective horror in this, from the human element and the not so human element. Very, very atmospheric, very dark. I definitely would recommend Pines by Blake Crouch. These 3 are almost head and shoulders above everything else on this list. At number 3 is Dracula. There's a huge jump up in quality for these next 3 books. Dracula, for me, the first half of Dracula may be the best first half of any book I've ever read. It's really, really, really good. It goes up there and it kind of swings, trades blows with the likes of Lord of the Rings and The Count of Monte Cristo. The first half of Dracula is exceptional. Very, very well written, very creepy, very dark, very, very unique. Even within the vampire genre, I would say this is quite a unique story. I don't really need to talk too much about Dracula. It's my number 3 for good reason. And sticking with vampires, this is like the 3rd vampire novel in this top 10. It's Salem's Lot. Now, this may be, in my opinion, the creepiest book on this list. This is very, very effective writing by Stephen King. This is a fantastic story, great characters, great atmosphere, and the enemy is... There's not a lot of scenes with the enemy, but 2 or 3 of them stick out so much. They really put kind of like goosebumps on your skin, that kind of classic cliche. Certainly you will get it from Salem's Lot. So what could be better than Dracula and Salem's Lot? Well, in my opinion, that would be Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This is a classic, obviously. It is a book of extremely deep themes. It is very well written. It almost sparked a genre in science fiction. It is a very early horror novel. It's hard for me to look further than Frankenstein. I feel like it is a classic with extremely high quality that will be very hard for a lot of horror novels to compete with. But luckily, I haven't read that many horror novels yet. A lot of the books I didn't put in here were really kind of, bestseller shelf fillers. I've got mostly classics on this list. But I really, really look forward to reading more in the horror genre and seeing what can compete with the likes of Dracula and Frankenstein for me. It should be really interesting the next couple of years. Like I say, I'm going to give myself about 3 years until I update this list, because I want to make sure that I've read at least another kind of like 20 horror stories before I get back to making an update to this list, and hopefully see if any can kind of compete with great classics like Frankenstein.